Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Whether you're joining us from radio, TV, the live stream, podcast space, wherever, we are glad to bring you a lot of the news that we're not going to waste any more time. Let's dive right in. There was a rather curious indictment that was announced today by none other than FBI Director Kash Patel. And then after these charges were brought forward, these 4 felonies, immediately pleading not guilty to all of them. And this is one of the more bizarre crimes that I have seen. Check it out. According to Kash Patel, quote, "This afternoon, a former managing assistant U.S. attorney who supported Jack Smith's politicized investigation of President Trump has been charged with stealing the confidential investigation documents." Now, right off the top, this is so ironic Alanis Morissette is tuning the guitar, okay? Because this was an investigation about classified documents. And the assistant prosecutor in this case, this Linberger, is alleged, she's accused of allegedly emailing the confidential material from this case to her own personal email. Hillary Clinton, anyone? Disguising them as dessert recipes to conceal them from record searches. We've talked about this on the show in the last couple of months. I've told you that Freedom of Information Act requests, and I filled out tons of them. In fact, there used to be a FOIA, FOIA at tonykinnett.com email that I would use to actually carry out FOIAs with various state, local, and the federal government. Because you send in, hey, these are the list of words that I need you to laboriously type in to Microsoft Outlook. And 3 weeks later, when Outlook decides to work, I want all of the emails that have to do with these different words and terms. And I was, pretty good at it because as a former educator in that system, as a former administrator, I knew all the fancy words that you would hide things under. Dessert recipes was not one of them. So Carmen Linberger, she is a longtime federal prosecutor, age 62, who served as the managing assistant U.S. attorney for the Fort Pierce branch of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida. And you'll know that Judge Ilhan Omar, the Southern District of Florida, is where President Trump was investigated and tried by Jack Smith. And this is where things do get pretty interesting here. But to finish the statement from Kash Patel, quote, "Linberger is charged with 4 felony counts in this indictment." That is not a small number. "The FBI will not hesitate to bring to account those who violated the trust of the American public in an investigation that should have never been brought to begin with." That is going to be a theme of some of these indictments here at the beginning of the show. The FBI will not hesitate. The Department of Justice will not hesitate. Marco Rubio, fueled by 8 white Monster energy drinks in a row, will not hesitate. You're going to hear a lot of that this evening. So who is this particular individual? What are these allegations? So in late 2024, early 2025, between December of 24 and January of 25, Linberger allegedly received access to Volume 2 of Smith's final report. It's a detailed recap of the investigation into Trump's retention of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. This volume remained under seal by order of U.S. District Judge Ilhan Omar. You might say, why would she need to seal those orders? You shouldn't be asking that question. Ilhan Omar sealed this information regarding these documents because those documents were classified. Now, they were things that the President of the United States absolutely had the authority to take with him. We saw this from everyone all the way from on the left, Joe Biden, to the right, Mike Pence, Barack Obama. Every president has taken home a little manila envelope of memories with them when they leave office. But Jack Smith was alleging that the President of the United States, after his first term, took a bunch of documents to, I guess, as some of the outlets that would later interview him and fawn over him and do everything short of making Robert Mueller saint candles of him, suggested that President Trump was planning on, I guess, selling these documents to China or North Korea, or the allegations were never quite clear. So in this, again, classified documents case, I can't really call her a young lady, but this lady, Linberger, allegedly downloaded and saved the report and possibly related internal Department of Justice memos on her government computer. She then emailed it to her personal accounts, Gmail and Hotmail. To conceal it, she renamed the files, quote, bunt underscore cake underscore recipe.pdf and chocolate cake recipe PDF, and used similar subject lines, as though she was browsing Pinterest or Instagram at work from her work account. Yeah, this isn't making a lot of sense. And had to get them. Oh man, these recipes. Oh, we got to get. After all, everyone saves recipes in PDF formats, which is apparently I did the thing. I reached out to a friend of mine at the Department of Justice and asked how these documents were located, and they said, we found it rather odd that from this individual, when there was a tip sent in about them, that they were sending a lot of PDFs, or Adobe Acrobat PDF files that really aren't normally used for that kind of a thing. You're not exactly, I mean, you might send a screenshot of something to yourself. You might send a link to yourself to that recipe, but how many of you are at work swapping USB drives and PDFs of various recipes for baking goods? I don't know. I'm not a baker, so I'll move on there. This occurred while she held a supervisory role in the same Florida district where Smith's team filed the Trump documents case. Now, here's where things get fun. Though she was considered an ally of Jack Smith, meaning he knew her, she was very supportive of prosecuting President Trump, she wasn't on Smith's core special counsel team. No, that counsel had other issues. But her office did support aspects of the probe. That's according to a couple of documents and communication measures from CNN. So for all of you here on the live stream side of things, here is a picture of her. Positively lovely. Here's some of the issues and some of the suggestions, what we know about it. The 4 felonies are all related to leaking classified documents. Now, again, classified documents in this case, one of the reasons that Jack Smith was chosen was because he was supposed to have some kind of scruff McGruff nose for crime, and that he was going to treat this with the sensitivity it deserved. So why was this individual, who already reportedly, again, alleged, and I should say alluded to, in the CNN reporting on this matter, has been suggested for years that she was very political in her position. I know.
Oh, there's a big surprise.
Oh man, all of these openly political appointments. You know, the kind that Chuck Schumer bragged about in the beginning of the Trump administration. Oh, we've appointed all these judges. It turns out that they don't just honor the law and do all of this blind justice stuff. And, oh, they're so amazing, we should never question them. After this volume 2 was sent to her, in 2025 and 2026, some of these memos or summaries, which had not even been shared with certain parts of Congress, even in like kind of the official channel side of things, suddenly started falling out into the open. In fact, NBC News had an article, and I had to go digging through for this one, so I believe we may be the first show that's drawing this connection here. At 1:59 p.m. Eastern on, March 25th is when this was updated. Oh boy, they've gone and updated this since. Originally, this article came out back in February of 2025. But former special counsel Jack Smith's team had evidence, quote, that President Donald Trump had classified documents, according to a memo obtained by NBC News, summarizing what prosecutors were working on as of January 23, part of this sealed document that they received from Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Which again is rather strange, because Jamie Raskin is not one of the individuals who was sent some of these particular files. The Justice Department under President Joe Biden appealed by ruling Cannon, who had been reversed on appeal after she tried to appoint a special master to review the classified documents seized from Mar-a-Lago. 3 Republican appointed judge found that Cannon, they say, improperly exercised equitable jurisdiction. So Eileen Cannon at the time was criticized because she said, look, we don't really have anyone trustworthy to review these documents. And there were 3 judges who said, oh, come on, you're just being silly. I don't think that Judge Eileen Cannon was wrong. Now, to be very fair here, this former federal prosecutor, Carmen Linberger, there's nothing yet that we have that is a direct link right to the core. These are the leaked documents at all. However, there have been speculation on the judicial circuit side for quite a while that these documents had to get from the Jack Smith analysis side of things to Congress, because Jack Smith was not authorized to be sending out a series of reports to Jamie Raskin. Not until committee hearings in the second Trump administration. So it had to come from somewhere, and it just so happens that his old pal, Carmen Linberger sending herself some recipes might have something to do with it. We're going to find this out in discovery. She's pleaded not guilty to all 4 charges. She just, who hasn't downloaded classified documents and named them their favorite dessert recipes? I have a series of drone schematics that I named Boston cream pie and Krispy Kreme glazed donut years ago. I'm not telling you what I did with those documents. On the other side of the Department of Justice stuff, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said, quote, "Over 3 decades later, we are committed to holding those accountable for the murders of 4 brave Americans, Carlos Costa, Armando Alejandre Jr., Mario de la Peña, and Pablo Morales. For the first time in nearly 70 years, senior leadership of the Cuban regime has been charged in the United States for alleged acts of violence resulting in the deaths of American citizens." And here's that line I told you to remember. The president, POTUS, and this Justice Department are committed to restoring a simple principle. If you kill Americans, we will pursue you, no matter who you are and no matter what title you hold. This is part of a series of actions from the Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, where we are seeing action after action after action based on the principle of, if you done goof, the Department of Justice is going to show up with a hanky and a pair of handcuffs, to quote the Incredibles of all things. Now, we're going to get to some of the Cuba stuff here in a minute, but on the matter of investigations, we talked yesterday about Ilhan Omar being under investigation, both at the Department of Justice now and officially the House Ethics Committee. And some of you made a couple of interesting points over in the live chat, and then, of course, on our Discord channel. You can find a link to that in the description, over in the mail time side, saying, hey, I thought Ilhan Omar was kind of already under investigation, not under the actual Ethics Committee and Department of Justice investigation. There were some inquiries that had been sent. The Biden administration had originally investigated Ilhan Omar briefly, but curiously never reached out to her and asked any questions, which is a very strange thing. If you're asking for, or if you're looking for, financial documentation because your husband is a Muslim venture capitalist who invests in wineries, which is kind of haram, and you accidentally overestimate your wealth from, $18,000 to $100,000, and then from $100,000 to $30 million. Again, I have a couple of total valuation changes, at the scope of tens of millions of dollars in my cake recipe collection, all saved in filed PDFs on Hillary Clinton's email servers. But alas, I'll continue here. Ilhan Omar, who a couple of months ago was rather smug. In fact, according to this clip from townhall.com, and their excellent digital team, Kevin McMahon, Siraj Hashimi, look at how Ilhan Omar's tone changes from a couple of months ago on a Breakfast Club podcast interview, all the way to when Fox Digital is asking her, hey, you're officially under investigation. What do you have to say? Check it out.
Listen, suggest all you want. Please investigate all you want, right? Like, to me, I'm not like I'm above the law and how dare you,
Did you ask Minnesota Democrats to block the subpoena for the investigation of Feeding Our Future on the
Uh-oh. That's another scandal we're going to talk about here in a second.
state level? The House Republicans are considering investigating Feeding Our Future now. Your role in it, would you cooperate with that subpoena and provide documents if they request it here in the House Oversight Committee?
Jeepers, she's not so cocky and arrogant now, is she? Oh, investigate all you want, ask and allege, insinuate, suggest, allude, conspectum circumfry, all you'd like. After all, she's just as pure as the driven bananas with rice. Well, you were called racist after you might have had a question or two when the people that she took campaign photos with just so happened to be the key players in that Feeding Our Future's Somali migrant fraud scandal. And I know there are a lot of Somali migrant care fraud scandals, and we're going to get to that because in Ohio, they're currently calling my colleague Mehet Cook, who was one of the original people that broke this story before even Luke Rosiak's crew at the Daily Wire, who we've also had on the show. Everyone's racist if you talk about it. There are concerns and reports from these whistleblowers that Tim Walz is now forced to apologize to, that Ilhan Omar begged, in fact, several of the Minnesota Democrats to block the subpoena on the Feeding Our Future's Somali migrant fraud to begin with. which is a very strange thing. I thought we were all open books around here. You know, I thought that everything was fair game. Investigate all you want. That's what she said.
Listen, suggest all you want.
Suggesting that all we did, yeah.
Please investigate all you want, right?
That sounds like the most open invitation ever. So after the Biden DOJ started all of these sort of investigations, whether it's the Southern Poverty Law Center, again, we're going to get to that later in the show, or whether it's Ilhan Omar, these investigations, while they were in progress, magically, just suddenly vanished. Just, as Doc Brown would say, erased from existence. So all of a sudden, after not asking any questions or really diving into too many details, after years of that, then the new Department of Justice comes into play. Pam Bondi spends a lot of time cleaning house and then makes a couple of boo-boos. Todd Blanche steps up to the plate and says, hey, in this DOJ, if you FA, you will most definitely FO. And that seems to be what is being dug through right here and right now. And as to why hasn't anything happened so far, when you restart investigations, you first have to play the cat in the hat Dr. Seuss game of where it's not in order to dive into where it is. Because, you know, once things have been filed, you have to go to certain judicial offices and what did this judge do and what did this prosecutor do and did this assistant prosecutor mail herself anything in the form of Betty Crocker dessert recipes like it's a Kathy Mitchell commercial. Oh boy. All right. We've got a couple of updates on the Todd Blanche side regarding Cuba here in just a second. Ton to cover tonight. We got to swing back out and pick up a couple of crews from commercial. Don't go anywhere. It is just a jam-packed show tonight. You're going to love every minute of it or your money back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right, kids, let's talk a little bit here about some of the Cuban updates, because not only is Todd Blanche delivering indictments like the Waffle House, serving up delicious and often violent breakfasts, but these indictments appear to have a little bit more than just the kind of cursory how do you do. This isn't a strongly worded letter, and you say, well, how do you know this right off the bat? I don't really need to tell you that the whole Nicolas Maduro shenanigan might in fact shenan once again in a Cuban piece of soil instead of Venezuelan. Here's the acting attorney general.
Today, we are announcing an indictment charging Raul Castro and several others with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals.
As a reminder, some of you know this because you're old enough to have met many people like this. Some of you in the comments section are these people. Those who have escaped from Cuba's communist regime or who lived through the Eastern European or the Asian tyrannies of communism understand the amount of loathing that survivors of these regimes have for the disgusting scum that have been a key part in upholding these regimes.
With additional crimes as well, including destruction of aircraft and 4 individual counts of murder.
There we go. So here's why this matters. So first of all, I have held for a very long time, we can get into the political philosophy and discourse later. I usually save analysis like that to later on in the show. The importance of U.S. citizenship means that not only are you a citizen while you are here, this means that if you go abroad and a foreign government makes the stupid decision to imprison you, to abuse you, or God forbid, to murder you, especially if you are not on a military operation or you're not even participating in some kind of espionage action, and a foreign government molests you, then the United States better damn well take care of the situation. This is a very, very good thing. And anyone who disagrees with me on that point, I'm sorry, I absolutely don't care at all when it comes to what you might have to say about anything else. So let's move on a little bit forward here. What does this mean? So federal prosecutors on Wednesday announcing charges against former Cuban President Raul Castro. The dude is old, ancient, maybe even possibly older than Bernie Sanders. We're still not sure. And again, these indictments are for the 1996 downing of civilian planes operated by Miami-based exiles as the Trump administration escalates pressure on the communist government. So as a quick reminder, Bill Clinton is a coward. He completely botched the USS Cole, which led to 9/11, and he also botched the Cuban regime and its horrific treatment of not only the Cuban people, but also those who are United States citizens or legal residents. So that aside here, Senator Rick Scott of Florida made it clear when he was asked about this, like, what does this mean? Are we gonna move in? Are we gonna attack? Is this gonna be Iran 2.0 electric boogaloo or Venezuela 2.0, the fast and the cubious? What's going on? Here's what, again, Senator from Florida, Rick Scott, had to say on the matter.
Well, Castro controls all the money, all right? They control all the money. So hopefully now the money's drying up because of what Trump has done. But if you look at the people of Cuba, they're willing to fight for their freedom. They've been doing it. Unfortunately, the Diaz-Canal has been putting these peaceful protesters like Alexander in prison, and so hopefully now they're seeing that America will stand up for them, that they'll do it on their own. But if it takes something, we should not take anything off the table. I mean, the same thing happened to Maduro should happen to Raul Castro. But I'm not going to get ahead of whatever the Trump administration wants to do.
So what does that bear for at least the news side of things here? It's not just fodder for a clip. The key piece of the Trump actions, whether they come from the Iranian situation, the Venezuelan, or the Cuban, the economic leverage the United States wields can and should be used by the president. The Supreme Court made this very, very clear in their tariff rebuttal. Brett Kavanaugh and Justice Samuel Alito made it crystal clear the President of the United States may not have the authority to go out and be slinging tariffs like Johnny Appleseed slinging the old Red Delicious. No. Instead, the President of the United States has the authority under the U.S. Constitution to embargo whoever he wants with the greatest navy on the face of the earth. And that has a couple of economic implications. That means that the regimes that thought that China was just going to pay their pony-up fee for the end of time through the Belt and Road Initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative has essentially kneed its last howl. It ain't doing too hot there. The chopsticks on the economic stage are once again replaced by the American Colt. And that means on the economic stage that the United States could be looking at a generational series of dividends. And that comes into play on a number of ways, but we're not going to get into that analysis just yet. The President of the United States also stated this afternoon, quote, "We will not rest until the people of Cuba once again have freedom," end quote. Now, again, we've heard this before. Also, Secretary of State Marco Rubio directly addressed the Cuban people today, and he did so in Spanish, which, again, makes a lot of sense. And unlike a lot of videos, which are in Spanish kind of on the social media sphere, the Secretary of State did have the courtesy to throw the English translation and captions underneath it.
On
a day like today in 1902, the Cuban flag flew for the first time over an independent country. But I know that today, you who call the island your home are going through unimaginable hardships. Today, I want to share with you the truth about the reason for their suffering. And I want to tell you what we in the U.S. are offering to help you not only alleviate the current crisis, but also to build a better future. This is a drastically different message to the Cuban people than was sent right when John F. Kennedy stepped into office and was really dealt the shortest end of the stick, to mix metaphors. So with the United States back in the Cold War, obviously Russia was a major factor in what we really could and couldn't effectively do regarding the Cuban people. Now, we kind of pussyfooted around for far too long. And so by the time the United States was actually willing to do something effective in Cuba, it was too late. It was too late. And so we had to play diplomatic peekaboo regarding the rental check for Guantanamo Bay for a long time, and then the Cuban Missile Crisis, and when I next address this country, we could be in a state of war, that kind of a thing for a long time. And then Bill Clinton fumbled the football and also George H.W. Bush did too, Mr. Compassionate Conservatism. Again, another story for another time. Today, the Trump administration no longer has any cares to give. And in this instance, it means that the United States is making it clear that there is an offer to the Cuban people, not a Bay of Pigs invasion where we take a group of people from Nicaragua and then we drop them off and the United States Air Force doesn't show up to the party and plausible deniability and all that crap. Now, the United States has done a couple of key things here. So first of all, the Secretary of State, after outlining all of the egregious crimes of the Cuban regime, made it clear that the State Department stood by to provide aid to the people of Cuba. But it could not be handed out by the Cuban regime. It must be, required to be, handed out and distributed by the Catholic Church. So for all of the people who are like losing their minds that the Trump administration is getting rid of all of the Catholics in history and, oh, the Jews are reigning supreme and all that crap, the Trump administration is making it clear the Catholic Church is the only institution it trusts, period. Not the Red Cross. The International Red Cross is a disaster organization. Not the UN because, oh dear God. And not the Cuban regime, again, who took the little freedom flotilla that sailed to Cuba and dropped off, food that the Cuban regime took and medical supplies that the Cuban regime took and didn't make it to any Cuban hospitals. And the solar panels that were supposed to go to Cuban civilian hospitals that were then confiscated and then held by the, Cuban regime. Now the United States is taking a different approach, saying very clearly, at this point, if you don't play by our rules, who's to say? Something might indeed happen. Enter the U.S. Southern Command, who just so happened, as Marco Rubio was making this address, as the Department of Justice under Todd Blanche was issuing these indictments, the U.S. Southcom posted this. This is the USS Nimitz. One of the best damn aircraft carriers in the entire world. They say, quote, the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, the embarked carrier Wing 17, the USS Gridley, USNS Patuxent, are the epitome of readiness and presence, unmatched reach and lethality, and strategic advantage. The USS Nimitz has proven its combat prowess across the globe, ensuring stability and defending democracy from the Taiwan Strait to the Arabian Gulf. Now, why does this matter? Because while all of these things were going on, it just entered the Caribbean. And I don't mean the pirates ride at Disney. So it's back from the Persian Gulf. Again, the United States Navy is still holding the Strait of Hormuz locked down tight. We'll talk about that in just a second. But as far as the situation in the Cuban regime is concerned, this isn't another Bay of Pigs type stuff. The opportunity is there. The United States stands by and ready. What's going to happen? I have no idea. But with the way the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, with the way the Pentagon is not allowing journalists from the New York Times to just wander the halls of the Pentagon freely without a care, you shouldn't know everything that the United States is planning before it goes into it. And if you don't like certain elements of what the United States is doing at the executive branch level, that's what Congress is for. That is, it is in fact Congress who is supposed to rein in the executive branch, and then it's the judicial who's supposed to rein in Congress, and then sometimes the executive. But alas, that's another topic. Let's get into some of the stuff on Iran. The Iranian situation is also reaching more of a conclusive state, meaning we're starting to pick up speed yet again. So before we get to some of before we get to some of the election stuff on the Iranian situation and updates from the Middle East, the President of the United States made this statement today before he hopped on Air Force One to go address the Coast Guard and their graduation today. I think this is clip 6.
You said yesterday you're about an hour away from making a decision. Where does that stand today? Have you heard anything from them?
Very right on the borderline, believe me. If we don't get the right answers, it goes very quickly. We're all ready to go. We have to get the right answers. It would have to be a complete 100% good answers. And if we do, we save a lot of time, energy, and lives, most importantly.
How long will you wait?
Could go very quickly. Or a few days. It could be a few days, but it could go very quickly. Iran is a defeated nation. We're dealing with some people, and actually, I must tell you, we're dealing with some very good people. We're dealing with people that are, I think, far more reasonable than the people that are really no longer with us.
Now, according to the diplomatic wires, a lot of what the president is saying here, it bears fruit. There's evidence for it. So again, the IRGC, different sections are issuing different statements. We've gone over that before. There is literally every single day we wake up, and as the sun rises, we see a new set of standards of the IRGC announcing, oh, all of these new things we're going to do with the Strait of Hormuz. And then they fail by about noon. And then by the evening, they've announced that's done, and they're going to try something completely different. So again, moving forward a little bit here, the president did say one final thing on kind of hitting back to the Iranian regime. And then he talks a little bit about what he's actually trying to do with the back and forth here. So here's the president on hitting back.
We're respected all over the world. You saw that with China just recently. You saw that in Venezuela. You saw that right now in Iran. Everything's gone. Their Navy's gone. Their Air Force is gone. Just about everything. The only question is, do we go and finish it up, or are they going to be signing a document? Let's see what happens. People don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, and they will not have a nuclear weapon, and they want to make a deal so badly. We'll see what happens, but we hit them very hard, but we may have to hit them even harder, but maybe not. But we're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon and blow up the entire Middle East, Israel, the entire Middle East, and then come here for you. Not going to happen.
All right, so that's what the president said. Now, I told you that it's so funny how these things turn out. While I was kind of checking some of the media clips that the producers put in, and I'm not sure that I'll be able to put this on the screen effectively here. I might have to do something a little bit creative. I'll push the screen over and then bring it back because I don't have this set up in B-roll footage. When I told you that the Iranians literally come out every single morning their time and then bring forth a brand new edict of stuff they're going to do, I'm not joking. So what you're going to see here in a second, I'm going to pivot over to this. They have now announced their new plan is a boundaries on a supervision area of the Strait of Hormuz. I haven't seen this. They just posted this afternoon. But anyway, here you go. I'll pivot to it and then send it back. So just incredible, incredible stuff. I mean, best of luck to you. Exciting, thrilling. Now, the president did talk a little bit about kind of his negotiation strategy, the kind of stuff that he's trying to do, and why he leans towards kind of the back and forth. Here you go.
I never get tired. But what I like to do, if I can save war by waiting a couple of days, if I can save people being killed by waiting a couple of days, I think it's a great thing to do.
Again, that kind of an idea, I can just keep going, do the back and forth. That keeps them on their toes. That's what he's suggesting. Okay, so a couple of things to close this off, and then we'll get to some of the other outside exciting things in the Middle East here. So first of all, U.S. Central Command did announce today that elements of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit from the USS Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group conducted a boarding operation of the Iranian-flagged motor tanker, the Celestial Sea, in the Gulf of Oman. Turn that down a little bit because it's just, military noises. In support of the U.S. blockade, following a search, U.S. forces released the vessel, directing its crew away from Iranian ports. To date, the U.S. forces have redirected 91 vessels during the blockade, disabling 4 more. Again, they can't keep up with this particular pace. Now, away from all of this, there's the Israel side of things. So there is yet another super duper ultra flotilla sailed from those on the Marxist left that was supposed to go bring incredible aid to the Gazan people again. So we've heard this one before. The IDF did stop a lot of these individuals. They also were trying to bring aid to Hezbollah, which is wild. The Lebanese government was also very upset with this and asked Israel for help in seizing these vessels. But one of the individuals on this latest Greta Thunberg, you have stolen our dreams kind of runs, was the president of Ireland's sister, Margaret Connolly. And she has released a video because, the first thing you do when you're taken prisoner is they say, hey, take your phone and record a social media video. Anyway, here's her announcing that the Jews have kidnapped her, the Irish president's sister. Oh, no.
My name is Dr. Margaret Connolly. I am an Irish citizen and I work in Sligo, Ireland.
I love how the citizen of the country thing comes into play just as soon as you're captured. I think that's funny. I do. Because the citizen thing doesn't matter any other time at all. It doesn't. It doesn't matter any other time. It's, oh, migrants, no borders, just everybody all the time. You know, who cares if it's not safe? You know, vote whenever you want, that kind of a thing. But all of a sudden, when again, you're impounded and you're getting ready to be deported, all of a sudden, I'm an Irish citizen and they're after me, Lucky Charms.
If you are watching this video, it means I have been kidnapped from my boat in the flotilla by the Israeli occupying forces and am now being held illegally in an Israeli prison.
I mean, look at her. Look at that Israeli prison. I mean, it looks more like the redneck yacht club to me than like the prison.
I am so proud to be taking part in this flotilla. It is the largest to date. Thousands of people all over the world, citizens like you and me, have volunteered their services to help with this flotilla.
It's exciting. I'm so thrilled. Congratulations. Now, again, the Israeli side of the people who are just losing their minds, freaking out again over the Jews. The biggest side is not actually that over here today. Instead, the individuals in the fallout from the Massie election, and what I guess the way too online crew thinks that Americans are really concerned about, compared to what Americans are actually concerned about. We're going to get to that next, because the real conspiracies involve the 4th Congressional in Kentucky. We talked about this a little bit last night as the results came in, but now we have some of the data, and the conspiracy theories are wild that exactly the right number of mail-in ballots came all the way from Israel, all the way in, and helped Thomas Massie be defeated by Ed Galreinstein Goldbergman or something. We're going to talk about it here in a second, because it gets well, it's really embarrassing. It's like cold open from The Office stuff, but you do need to know it. And then we'll cut over to Ron Johnson from there, because what Americans are actually concerned about matters. We're going to bring the radio crew back in here. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Okay, so Thomas Massie, who spends his time being a dork, and again, to be transparent as I am at the very beginning of this, I used to have a friendly relationship with Thomas Massie back when I made this Ministry of Truth kind of satire page on the social media side of things. We'd originally talked about it. We obviously shared a love for gun rights and some libertarian sympathies that I have. But in the last year and a half, the man has decided to go completely cuckoo. And the reason that he went completely cuckoo, we'll talk about here in a minute. But before we get to that, again, as all of you by this point know, Ed Galrein, the former Navy SEAL, decorated combat veteran, and, Trump's endorsed pick for this primary, won. And he didn't just win against Massie. He skunked him by over 10,000 votes. Wasn't exactly close. And some of the actual totals are still being tallied for the exact number, as some of the, again, initial things are kind of going through on, like, this mail-in ballot, was it actually written correctly? And that brings us to the ultimate super duper incredible conspiracy theories. Before we get to that conspiracy theorizing, though, Thomas Massie had his own theory right away. So his own theory right off the front was that Tel Aviv, the Israelis, the Jews, they did it. They bought his seat. Oh, wow. I mean, can't believe. So anyway, here we go. Here was his coming out sort of concession speech.
I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv.
Good one. So the allegation that he makes is, and again, his argument, he says that this was the most expensive primary in all of the history ever. And the reason it was so extremely super duper ultra expensive, the reason that all came to a point was because they wanted to get rid of me. Now, it should be noted that, again, 92% of Thomas Massie's donations came from out of state. He was also funded by the millionaires and the billionaires. He was endorsed by also, along with some right-wing groups, a lot of left-wing groups. It was a key point, a bellwether for those who have bucked Trump in the legislature. And as Thomas Massie has voted no and no and no and no and no, and then ran around back to Kentucky and said that actually he voted yes all the time with Trump and he was super duper pro-Trump. No. So let's dig into, I'll give you Ed's victory speech as well. Ed Gowrine came out, had kind of a different message that he thought this was a result of. Here is Ed Gowrine with his victory speech.
I'm going to keep this simple because, again, I speak fluent Kentuckian. Because for the same reasons I joined in 1983 to serve our nation. Remember, I didn't join to be a Navy SEAL. I joined to make a difference. And being a Navy SEAL was the path to do that. Weren't no books and movies, never met one. I learned to swim in the Ohio River. That's ill-advised, but that's what I did on the farm.
That is indeed ill-advised.
Would have got a whooping had I found out at the house there I did that. But for the same reason I entered as a Navy SEAL officer in 1983, because I had the audacity to think I could make a difference. And I did. I will serve this district, my party, and my nation with that same audacity to make a difference for them, their families, our district, our party, and our nation. God bless America. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for coming tonight. Thank y'all.
It's the most charismatic he's ever sounded, to be honest with you. And again, he's cited kind of a Reagan-esque vibe to it. And that brings us to why the people elected Gowrine over Thomas Massie. That brings us, unfortunately, to the conspiracy side first. So a lot of these influencer accounts, and I thank God every single day that the influencer age appears to be dying out. It does. The age of people on social media who have really big accounts telling you exactly what to think because they're sponsored by some weird supplement that you've never heard of that contains real glycine, whatever nonsense, have come forward with all of the conspiracy theories. And they're not even trying at this point. There are a couple of them. So Massie thinks, well, Israel moved in, that Netanyahu deployed Mossad to buy it out or whatever. On the flip side, though, you have this incredible argument. So Lauren Witzke, who I've again, never heard of before, a kind of cardboard cutout influencer blondie girl on the sloppy list right, said Ed Gowrine received 10,854 mail-in ballot votes tonight. Thomas Massie lost by 10,280 votes. That's not a coincidence. Yeah, doesn't that sound super suspicious? She then says Massie was defeated by an out-of-state money and by voters who were literally out of state. My dear Watson, incredible stuff, beautiful. I mean, just wow. How can you argue? How can you argue with this? Only here's the problem. That's all complete crap. Don't just go to me. Don't even just go to the numbers. Even the Thomas Massie supporters made it clear. Honey, sweetie, baby, darling, you're retarded. You are in fact retarded. So is one. Well, this is a different complaint. We'll get to that in a minute here. The numbers are bad, but the Thomas Massie fans, I don't have this one loaded. According to a guy named Jeff Dornick, he said, quote, "I'm a Massie supporter, but we have to look at the full context here." He said Gowrine had 10,854 mail-in ballots, which, by the way, not true. But he said Massie had, off the top of my head, 8,400 mail-in ballots. So the discrepancy there would only be about 2,000, meaning Massie also had a fair-sized number of the old ballots. Now, again, the actual absentee ballots for Ed Gowrine are now much higher. It's about 11,000, and Massie's absentee ballot count is also higher. It's about 9,000 now. But why do I bring that up? Why do I say that they're wrong for saying 10,854? Because the mail-in ballots, you have to actually go through and verify with some of the county judges, the ones that came in and they didn't do the boxes correctly. We've known these people our entire life. Those who on standardized testing, it like tells you, here's how you fill in the bubble on the page. And instead of just filling in the oval, they draw a fish. And it's like that kind of stuff. That stuff has to be judged. So some of those people, bless their hearts and souls, who still vote, some of that stuff is calculated. Now, it's a very small number in this election. And so far, it appears that Gowrine and Massie are ticking up the same number as those last percentages are counted. So Even the Thomas Massie people have made it clear right up front already. Massie's also received 8,000. So were those also fake, out of state, out of ballot, out of district kind of votes? No. And it's extremely retarded to suggest that not knowing how many ballots would be needed, so that I guess the argument is that Israel knew in advance, way early on. Oh, Israel, they knew, you know, in their crystal Jewish ball, that Massie was going to be behind by, or it was going to be ahead or dead even, I guess, at the number. So then they sent over 10,000, which is exactly how much he lost by. These are the kind of people who say, you know who else drank water? Hitler. Okay, Hitler didn't drink water that good. We'll get to that in a minute, though. So really dumb stuff. The other theories that have been... So by the way, she did respond to that Massie supporter. She said, well, the betting markets did a complete 180 for last minute for Massie. So like Polymarket and Kalshi and the other betting markets, they had Galrein and Massie very close. And then there were some last minute scandals, some of which I called into question, said, this isn't really a scandal, and this is like a lot of wish casting. And some of it was Massie was like taking, video hugs with a guy in like an American Reich sweatshirt. And, a lot of the people on the Polymarket side looked at some of the polls and said, oh yeah, I'm throwing all of my last minute money doing a Mr. Krabs, betting it all on Neptune kind of a thing. So that's your big conspiracy. I don't think so, honey, sweetie baby. Again, it does get better. There were a couple more, but the other sneaky super duper conspiracy theory here was that Galrein refused to do any debates, which again is not true. He had very few supporters at his campaign events. He also had very few supporters at his victory party. So there was this video that went around that said that there were very few people that were actually at Galrein's victory party. Here was the problem, though. The video showed that there were about 20 or 30 people in the room at 5 p.m. That's when the video was taken and uploaded, 5 p.m. So if you've ever been a part of any political campaign ever, you will know that before the polls are closed, everyone in the campaign is out doing the canvassing and the talking to people outside afterward when they're coming out, that kind of a thing. And later on in his victory speech, there's a lot of people in the room. So those are the big, huge, super duper ultra conspiracy theories. The Democrats are trying to run with this, bless their little hearts. Chris Murphy says, so there you have it. If you lead a campaign against powerful pedophiles, you get drummed out of the Republican Party. See, it's Epstein. Epstein mailed in the votes. That's right. Why won't they name those people? Why? So as many have pointed out at this point, up to and including the Epstein survivors, hey, if you guys know the names, would you share them? So far, all that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie did was go to the floor of the House and announce and dox people in an FBI lineup who had nothing to do at all with Epstein at any point in time. So they doxed innocent people. And then Ro Khanna turned around and invited one of the people who groomed women for Epstein as his partner guest to the State of the Union. So again, I'm still waiting. You have all of these like names of like really impressed. The only person that has been named so far who has been kind of obscured and who hasn't released everything connected to him is Steve Bannon. Sorry. Big womp, capital womp there for you. I don't know what else to tell you. But again, moving aside from that, again, I said Ro Khanna is very upset. He is. He's weeping the big, huge crocodile tears. Here you go.
My good friend Thomas Massie lost tonight. I'm angered by the smears on his character. He lost because he had the guts to take on the Epstein class.
We'll talk about this in a second. None of the data shows this, by the way. None of the data. Thomas Massie has been on this show. We've beat the crap out of him repeatedly on here for just voting no because he's a petulant child. The same reason that Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, senator, is now voting no on things. He's grumpy. He's become a whiny little girl on everything. That's why the voters of Kentucky are salty. But again, we'll get to that from an actual Kentuckian here in a minute.
He lost because he had the guts to stand up against the war in Iran. He worked with me to pass the most consequential and popular piece of bipartisan legislation in recent history in the Epstein Transparency Act. Many young voters.
Yeah, again, the thing that led to doxing innocent individuals. Excellent. Great work, homie.
Under 50 voted for him. He was winning them by over 30 points.
The youths. We'll talk about that.
And today I say you may not have a home in the Trump coalition, but there is a new generation of populist Democrats.
Yes, the Bernie Sanders and the the Plattner who masturbates in porta potties and says that, he still reminisces about the smell, and your AOCs and your Bodhi Sanders and then your Zoran Mamdanis. That's the populist wing. The really hyper violent, the really friendly with like the hates Christians and Jews crowd, and then also the socialist Marxist crew. Isn't that exciting? You have a new home. I mean, it's thrilling stuff indeed. So why actually did the Massie coalition lose? Because Kentucky people wanted a guy who voted on stuff that they sent him to office to vote for. He didn't do it. Scott Jennings made this point perfectly clear. And again, being in Kentucky, man's got a point.
You raised a good question about the people who voted for Trump. As a voter in this district, let me stand up for my people. These people voted for Donald Trump. They also voted for Massie on the expectation that he would help Donald Trump enact his agenda. He stopped doing that, and it's pretty simple. They decided to get a congressman who will help him enact that agenda. It's easy to overanalyze this. The bottom line is they love Trump. They love his agenda. Tax cuts, border security, you name it. Massie got off that team, and they wanted to put someone on the team who would help the president. It's pretty simple.
So there you go. That is absolutely 100% correct. That is what voters want. Voters want a series of things from Congress, and they're not getting it. And nowhere is this more clear than in the Senate. Voters are pissed. They are outraged at a lot of senators who have gone to D.C. and have decided to do nothing. And even though the Republicans have a majority, there's still that 60 vote threshold. There's the filibuster there. And so a lot of people in the United States, in every single state of this country, especially every state that has Republican representation in the Senate, who has said, I want you to overturn the filibuster. And that's not happening. It's not happening in Kentucky with Mitch McConnell. It's not happening all the way over to North Carolina with Tom Tills. We've talked about this with Susan Collins up in Maine, Lisa Murkowski up in Alaska, and quite a few more on the Senate side. We're going to swing back out. We're going to come back in with Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who is here to break down what's going on, what are his colleagues doing, and what's actually the strategy, if any, moving forward, and maybe even what we should be trying to do to get things moving. Because if representatives and senators aren't going to vote for stuff that Americans want, there are some things that you can do. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to cover. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
We go over to Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, one of the guys in the Senate who spends a good amount of time keeping track of what his constituents are looking for from the United States Senate. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, let's dive right into it. There's a lot of discussion about the filibuster, what can and can't be done. And I know there are a lot of colleagues who feel as though we're kind of playing by old rules, as though everyone's going to keep their hands off of that 60 vote filibuster limit. And that's not quite the game that we're playing anymore. What are you seeing on the inside?
Oh, again, this is a new Democrat Party. It's the radical left. It's not the same Democrat Party of our parents and grandparents. JFK would probably be the most conservative Republican senator in the Republican conference. So, no, we have to recognize what's happening right now. The radical left, which is the Democrat Party, they are at war with us. They don't view us as a political opposition. We're going to maintain this two-party structure. They want to turn America into a one-party nation. This literally is a moment of survival. It's a moment of truth. Are we going to preserve this nation? Are we going to preserve our liberties? Because the goal of the Democrat Party is to turn America into a one-party nation. They've shown us the game plan. Now, I've been saying this literally for the last year. Kamala Harris just laid it all out there.
We talk about what we need to do and think about doing around the Electoral College. We talk about the idea of Supreme Court reform, which includes expanding the Supreme Court. We invite a conversation about multi-members districts. We talk about, that if we win the Senate, which we should and we will, then the Senate Judiciary Committee should have rules that they put in place so when these people come before as nominees to the Supreme Court and lie, that they are held to account and consequence. Not just that somebody goes on cable news and says they lied, but that there are rules in place to actually penalize people for lying to a Senate Judiciary Committee. That we agree that it is right to have ethics rules for Supreme Court justices. And let's put those in place. Let's talk about statehood for Puerto Rico and D.C. These are the things I think that we've got to do. We've got to neutralize these red states from cheating, including blue states expanding their maps.
When they get power, they will end the filibuster. They'll turn D.C., Puerto Rico into states. They'll pack the Supreme Court. They'll nationalize the elections, automatic registration, mail-in ballots, lose all control over our elections. Do you really believe that a party that opened our borders, allowed millions of people to flood into this country, to put them into sanctuary cities, to plus up the census, to make them dependent on government so they'll vote for the party of big government, do you really think that party that subjected America to such risk, such danger with human drug sex traffickers, members of the most violent gangs, transnational criminal organizations, that party, when they get majorities in the House, Senate, and the presidency, will balk at changing a little old rule in the Senate that's going to prevent them from acquiring that goal, from achieving that power? There's no way. And so that's really the split in the Republican conference. Those of us who recognize that reality, and those of my colleagues who just don't want to believe it, hoping against all hope that, oh, no, Democrats won't do that. There's some of them are saying they regretted their vote to end the filibuster. Poppycock.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because what we've heard from some of the members, at least I originally have cited four. I know you say there are some others who are really hesitant about moving against the filibuster. They cite the time of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema when those two stood in the breach on the Democrat side of the aisle and refused to overturn the filibuster. And now, here we have a situation where Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, I read the Senate record. I read the list of senators. They're not on it anymore. They're not here. And it is a different party. I know there was this Susan Collins letter ages ago that she had all of these, Democrat senators sign a Scout's honor kind of promise that they would never touch the filibuster. And then over 24 of those individuals who signed that particular letter ended up going back and trying to get rid of it anyway. It's a totally different ballgame.
Well, except for Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, every Democrat that signed that letter just a year or two before they then voted to end the filibuster.
Right.
So you can't believe them. Let's face it, Democrats have cover of the legacy media. There's the communication arm of the Democrat Party. They can lie. They can be grotesque hypocrites with impunity because they're never held accountable. So no, I don't believe for a minute that they regret voting to end the filibuster. They're just really playing some of my colleagues for fools, trying to convince them, you don't end the filibuster. We won't do that either. No, they absolutely will do it.
This kind of goofy backdoor pinky promise stuff that's used to say, well, you don't want to be viewed as the person who wrecked it all, do you? I'll pinky promise, you'll pinky promise, and we'll walk away hand in hand. I'm frustrated because this is the kind of thing that occurs in conversations inside the Beltway, this kind of faux geniality that is completely out of touch with the constituents in their districts. So, for example, just to pick a senator who I know, he and I have kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit, Todd Young from Indiana. Nice guy. He's a little skittish on changing some rules, or has been in the past. Don't know how he feels about this now. But we've talked about this, and he has had that kind of a stance on this before, that he's wanted to wait because, well, maybe once we open Pandora's box, it can't be shut again. And I just think that that's a time gone by that's hopelessly out of touch with what Hoosier voters are expecting from the Republican Party in the Senate.
Well, again, Pandora's box has been blown wide open.
Yeah.
This is a slippery slope, but we're so far down that slippery slope, we're at the bottom of the hill. Three different occasions, we have now eliminated all 60-vote threshold for all nominees. Started with all judges other than Supreme Court, then we had a Supreme Court, now we include all nominees. We're pushing reconciliation way beyond anything the people who designed this stupid process of reconciliation.
It's not a budget balancing measure anymore.
There's just not much left.
It's a circus. I mean, I've never seen, we're talking about things, so we obviously sit through all of these big policy calls, And again, this is something that back when I was just a wee lad for Governor Scott Walker's office, I used to ask you about. You said you're going to get tired of all of these policy calls you have to sit through. And you were right. There are all of these harebrained mousetrap chutes and ladders conversations about things Republicans can shove through the reconciliation process that have nothing to do with the budget, that is just an excuse for not knocking over the filibuster and just passing things. I mean, how many mental gymnastics are we going to see in order to give some Republicans cover for not going on the record to state publicly whether or not they're willing to get rid of the filibuster, whether it's conference vote, caucus vote, floor vote? What kind of thing needs to happen?
Well, again, what I proposed in the Wall Street Journal op-ed is at a minimum, let's vote on a rule change. That would require a 67-vote supermajority. That's the way you change the rules in the Senate, with 67 votes, and just at least get the Democrats on record. I mean, now that you're in the minority, are you going to vote to end the filibuster like you did a couple of years ago or not? Now, will that prevent them in the future if they vote against ending it now? Ending it when they get it? I don't think so, not at all.
Right.
But at least you get them on the record. And who knows? Maybe they'll actually, with integrity, vote to end it, and then have enough Republicans vote to end it, and we just do it with 67 votes. I don't know how that would turn out, but I think at a minimum we ought to take that vote.
So kind of the last question I have there is that this kind of a measure would need to be introduced or at least confirmed and approved by Senate leadership. I know it's very easy to get on social media and just lay this all at Senate Majority Leader John Thune's feet, when I think that there's quite a bit more that goes into this. And please do correct me if I'm wrong. What's the balance between kind of what Thune needs to be doing to get some of these Republican members of the Senate on board, again, as you've been trying to do, and convincing them it's a totally different ballgame, it's time to move? What should Thune be making kind of his actions to do? How much blame does he bear? Help me figure this out.
Well, it's not Thune's fault. He doesn't have the votes. But again, every Republican senator wanted to maintain the filibuster when we were in the minority and Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema voted not to end it.
Sure.
And we were all on board. So there's a great reluctance within our party. It's not just 4 members. There are a lot of Republican senators that don't want to be the vote. So, I'm the one that changed the filibuster, that now the Democrats are using that, the lack of a 60-year-old threshold, to destroy this country.
Right.
I got that. We don't want the blood on our hands of destroying this country. The problem is they're going to do it. So the only way this happens is if President Trump can make a convincing and disciplined case of this is what has to be passed and how we'll pass it. Now, when he first proposed this months ago, I was probably the first senator publicly to agree with him, because I recognize the reality. But I said, Mr. President, before we do that, you need to lay out exactly what policies have to be changed, what laws need to be passed that the American people support in overwhelming majorities, and that you can pass with a slender majority in both the House and Senate. You got to lay that out. Instead, he issued about a 30-point kind of policy list. It wasn't focused. It wasn't convincing. It requires presidential leadership. It requires the president to do a really good sales job, as opposed to just kind of carping from the sidelines and blaming a few people. I mean, this takes a concerted effort to explain to not only the Republicans, but the American people why we must do this. That hasn't occurred yet.
And it's a case that I think has been made to a lot of the American people. In fact, I believe the American people have made this case. That's something that you've talked about, that those people whose senators come home and talk to their constituents hear this from their own people. But inside D.C., that's where the convincing has to take place. And so I have to ask you, as a guy that gets to walk behind those closed doors, are these people who can be convinced? Are there still a lot of these Republican senators who can be convinced? Because I see with Cassidy losing his primary, that there's just a desire to kind of just be obstinate for obstinate's sake. Is that what we're doomed to, or is there still a chance to actually change some people's minds on the Republican Senate?
Well, it only needs 4 people to be obstinate. Right. Okay? And we probably have at least that 4. So, but again, there are a lot more that are very reluctant, and they can remain reluctant and continue to tell their constituents, "Oh yeah, I'm willing to end that filibuster."
As long as they're not on the rule change record.
As long as they don't have to vote. So again, I'd say call the vote.
I mean, what else is there to add on top of that? I think that's a great starting point, and it's actually answering the question, which is, of course, why we continue having you on, because you don't dance around the stuff, which, I could see a little bit more of. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, thank you for giving us a couple of minutes and diving into this and also laying it out clearly and plainly.
Have a great day. Take care.
All right. So if the kind of Senate focus is really on pretending to be from flyover country, but not doing so, like not actually being worth anything, that's nothing new. You guys are used to this. Heading into election season, there are so many that constantly pretend to be from flyover country. Tried and true Americans are just like you and me. They're taking their pictures at the state fair with their elephant ears. Oh, that makes them, they're just like us. Many of you guys know I have a pretty big number of ways that prove that I am broadcasting as a Hoosier just out of Indiana. I'm a genuine guy who did grow up in the country. I'm really picky when it comes to my food and my drink. And I'm wildly picky when it comes to my water. Really, really, really picky. And if that sounds weird, if you're from the coast, you don't understand what I mean, let me explain. I hate the taste of city water. I hate it. I'm a well water man, born and raised. What I didn't think about was everything that happens to leach into the ground around it. Agricultural runoff, old pipes, chemicals that I can't see or taste. Then, after a recommendation from Victor Davis Hanson, and seriously, that is who the recommendation came from, I tried Cove Pure. They sent out a Cove Pure machine, and this is now why you see a mason jar of water on the news desk next to my cup of coffee or energy drink. It's delicious. It is the only thing I've ever had that makes my well water, after it's been softened, I'm not an animal, seriously, only thing that makes the well water taste better at all. Uses reverse osmosis to get the purest drinking water you're going to find anywhere. Some of you guys have written in because you've grabbed a couple of Cove Pure machines since they've started sponsoring the show, because they give our viewers a really excellent deal, and you love it for a good reason. Oh, it's delightful. Anything that isn't water gets filtered out. Instant refrigeration and heating, so whenever I'm enjoying a cup of Earl Grey tea or icy water, quenching my thirst here on the show with delicious Hoosier well water, it's easy with Cove Pure. No stupid plastic pitcher I have to keep refilling, and now my wife sneaks out to the studio to refill her water bottles from the Cove Pure. So go to covepure.com/TonyK, check out the amazing deal they have just for our audience, because the first time we mentioned them on the show, you guys shocked him with how many of you enjoyed the Cove Pure stuff and joined the Cove Pure crew. So you guys know I'm extremely picky about sponsors from the show. This one's a no-brainer. Visit covepure.com/TonyK. You will not regret it. So that aside, along the other side of things that Americans want, it's that, I don't want to say retribution, but it is holding people accountable for their actions. And this brings us to this investigation that, again, just like the investigation regarding Ilhan Omar, just like investigations regarding the ethics of the Jack Smith investigation, now we get to another thing the Biden administration started and then just randomly dropped the ball on. And that's the Southern Poverty Law Center, who is alleged and who is currently charged with funding and planning several of the neo-Nazi rallies, lying to their donors, forming bizarre shell companies, which is all the rage these days, in order to prop up white supremacy in the country. The thing they were claiming to be against, they were actually on. And my colleague, Tyler O'Neill, knows more about this than practically anyone. He's written several books on the subject, and he was called to Congress to testify before a committee about the Southern Poverty Law Center. And may I say, actually gave probably one of the best statements as to why the SPLC not only defrauded their own donors, but also propped up some of the worst institutions in this country in order to then turn around and raise money off of it. Here was our Tyler O'Neill on Capitol Hill today.
Southern Poverty Law Center does not merely track hate. It systematically inflates it, profits from it, and, according to a federal indictment, may even have helped create it. The first thing to know about the SPLC is that it has nothing to do with poverty. The Poverty Palace has an endowment, has assets of $822 million. That's more than 3 times the assets of the National YMCA and almost twice the sum of Planned Parenthood. That's why former employees have suggested mocking mottos for the SPLC, such as making hate pay. How did the SPLC become so wealthy? Co-founder Morris Dees set up a lucrative fundraising engine, by suing the Ku Klux Klan into bankruptcy. When the SPLC ran out of grand dragons to slay, the center needed to find more hate to justify the fundraising.
This is such a classic comic book villain maneuver. After you've done all of the good work, there's no one left to prosecute. There's no one left to go after. There's no more money to be had at this well. So instead of reading the book Who Moved My Cheese and going somewhere new to find ventures, they decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make our own cheese. We're going to make our own KKK, and we're going to fight it. Again, it is the plot of The Incredibles. It's Syndrome. He's going to create robots that only I can defeat. That kind of crap.
It has a financial incentive to juice the numbers. The SPLC began to publish a hate map that plots mainstream conservative and Christian groups alongside Klan chapters. The map includes Moms for Liberty, PragerU, Turning Point USA, and even Focus on the Family. The SPLC says the map reveals the infrastructure upholding white supremacy.
And instead, as Tyler points out, it's literally anyone and everyone they don't like at all. Just going out, again, whether it's going after Charlie Kirk, whether it's going after, again, the Moms for Liberty, whether it's just going after those on the Christian side of the spectrum who are trying to focus on traditional family structures to reform and keep an eye on foster care and things. Oh no, the horror. That's who the SPLC went after. And so how did the Democrats respond to this committee? Jasmine Crockett, again, who lost her super duper special Senate primary to James Tallarico, again, somehow gayer than Pete Buttigieg. Jasmine Crockett, she had enough because the attention has not been on her for a long time. She's got to make the most out of C-SPAN 8, the Ocho, Corncob TV, pay-per-view committee events. And so she's got some questions to ask. And she wants to know, how come we aren't having any of these white supremacy hearings or something? Here's Jasmine Crockett.
We haven't had one hearing on white supremacy. Yet when we look at things like the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the 9 worshipers who were murdered at the Mother Emanuel AME Church, the 23...
Okay, hang on there. First and foremost, the SPLC hearing, yeah, that is a hearing on white supremacy. They directly funded white supremacy. They had in their pay who they called an informant, who but also happened to plan the entire Charlottesville, Virginia, Unite the Right rally. Literally planned by the SPLC, allegedly. Funded by the SPLC through shell companies. Oh, they're just informants. You know, yeah, sure, they're not a law enforcement entity. And they weren't actually used to immediately direct, indict, and arrest individuals who are breaking the law. But I mean, come on. So she's angry. Then she compares people who were mowed down by a mass shooter in church to George Floyd. You know, the guy who, when he wasn't counterfeiting it up and fentanylizing his local community, was beating pregnant women. Ah, yeah, just like those who were gunned down in a church.
People murdered in 2019 during the shooting at Walmart in El Paso, the 10 people murdered during the 2022 shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. All of these were murdered by white supremacists who are empowered by the Republican Party's racist rhetoric and policies.
So first of all, not only is she full of crap, but also it is worth pointing out, it is in fact worth pointing out that what would this committee hold? The current committee that was being held today, the SPLC committee, was to address the actions of the Southern Poverty Law Center and what they have done. What they have done specifically regarding their little hate map and funding shell companies and private groups and all of that. What are you supposed to do? Who is out there going, I really like these white supremacist shooters? If there's that person out there and they are doing something, I guess, sure, drag them before the committee. You're just yelling. You're just yelling. And look, could I make a joke about really insufferable women yelling for no reason? I could, but you've already thought of that. We're going to get emails. So anywho, she's very angry and she's mad. And of course, she's been upset ever since she lost her primary, whatever. Silly, goofy stuff for sure. Just best of luck to her. She was not the only one, by the way, who went down this weird rabbit trail today. Ayanna Pressley also had a little press conference saying that nothing has changed in this country for black people, which, this has been said a lot over the last couple of weeks that, oh man, if you took a black person from back then and you put them in the today, they would say nothing has changed for black people except we're on TV. Yes. By the way, how insulting to those who fought in the Civil War, who, by the way, were a bunch of white people. Also, a lot of evangelicals. Shout out to those Baptist battalions. Anywho, also, some of them in the civil rights movement. What an insult to say that actually things have gotten worse or nothing has changed. But alas, Ayanna Presley's out here saying, you got to give me money. Give me money. And yes, to the super chat, wasn't the Breonna Taylor situation of fake hate crime, that $2 super chat from Mark? Yes, you're absolutely correct. That also was one of those. It turns out that shooting police officers and pointing guns at them while you're holding the baby in the arms, no. But it's a hate crime immediately, that kind of a thing. Anyway, so here's Ayanna Presley saying, give me money, give me money, because everything is bad as it always has been.
Absolutely. I mean, not one promise has been kept to Black Americans in this country when every bit of prosperity you enjoy was built on our backs.
Okay, I can't just leave that alone. Not one promise to Black people has been kept. Yep. And then followed up by everything in this country has been built on the Blacks. So this is the 1619 Project garbage, where it's argued that, oh, wow, all of the financial and industrial wealth of the United States came on the backs of Black people. No, it is in spite of slavery in the South that the United States succeeded. The South chose to remain an agricultural economy without innovating. Atlanta did not grow because its investors chose not to invest in industry, like in the North. The South absolutely had the same rivers that could have supported the mill infrastructure and pseudo-industry that came before the English Industrial Revolution. They could have, absolutely. What's my evidence for this? Do you not remember all of the dams that got built from Tennessee on south, not only to mitigate flooding, but also to increase industry and power generation? The South chose not to do a lot of this. Again, like a lot of the Democrats are arguing right now, well, we need cheap labor because otherwise what about the economy? So she's full of crap. New York was not built off the backs of Blacks. It was built off the backs of the Dutch. And then it was built off of the backs of the English and the French and those born here in the colonies. She's full of crap. Again, sorry, former teacher who hates this kind of crap. I mean, the critical race theory argument's retarded, but so is Ayanna Presley. 400
years of labor for free. And we never got our 40 acres and a mule. And we are still, harmed by practices like redlining and appraisal bias.
Now, wait a minute. If you're against redlining, then why are you all of a sudden in favor of racial congressional districts? Huh? I mean, again, as much fun as it is for me to say read a book, may I recommend wholeheartedly, by the way, Black Rednecks and White Liberals by the excellent Thomas Sowell, where he talks very specifically about how Democrats took the principles of Jim Crowism and applied them into creating these poverty systems and districts where you can't touch Baltimore because, if you touch Baltimore and you stop all of the murder and the disease and the crime and the nonsense, well, that's really anti-Black. And if you redistrict this so that it's based on merit or industry or culture or something like that, then it's gonna remove, God forbid, you might get rid of the white Democrat in Memphis and a Black Republican woman might run. Can't have that. So again, Ayanna Presley's whole thing, give me money.
And so we are long overdue for reparations. I'm proud to be the lead sponsor of H.R. 40. Black folks are certainly deserving of redress and reparative work. And
so on that note, because again, for people who say that they always clarify it on the left as though you are white, you are Black, you are brown, whatever that means. That doesn't really have a meaning. But you are this. What about mixed people? Because there are far more mixed people, mutts through history, than there are of this like pure blood Severus Snape bullcrap. So how Black are you allowed to be before you get paid? Are we really going to do like the whole German, like I'm one-fourth Jewish? The Juden? One-fourth grandparent, great-grandparent? That kind of crap? Are we really going to do this? Or, hear me out, stop being a whining child. And this is the case that's made by Representative Wesley Hunt of Texas.
Let's take a moment to revisit what actual Jim Crow was. Jim Crow was a time when Black Americans could not sit in classrooms with white Americans. It was colored-only water fountains. It was beatings in the streets. It was lynchings. It was fear. It was public humiliation.
Wait a minute. Ayanna Presley just told me that stuff's still happening. Nothing's changed. No promise to Black people has been kept.
My own father who grew up in a segregated South in New Orleans had to walk around to the back of a restaurant just to order a sandwich in the French quarters of New Orleans because of the color of his skin. That was Jim Crow. And that is precisely why it is so offensive to compare that era of legalized discrimination and racial terror to showing a photo ID in a voting booth. And it's just as offensive when groups and organizations like these manufacture faux hate and racial tension. Requiring identification to vote is not oppression. It is not segregation. It is not racism.
Now, did you notice he doesn't have to put on an accent to impress people? Because you can read. Again, he has a rather decorated past. I mean, Wesley Hunt's an excellent guy. I mean, we've had him on the show before. He is one of the best people in Congress. So moving on from that side a little bit here, because there's a lot more that we could hit. On the Ohio fraud section as well, we might have to push this back to another night because there's a lot of fighting over the Somali fraud happening in Ohio as well. But before we get to that, which I don't really need to finish up tonight, I wanted to talk to you about one of the final things I promised to answer some of your questions on. The entire sloppy-list argument that really, when it comes to the really crazy people who used to be on the right and are now running for Democrats and things, again, your Massies, your Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, is those kind of goobers, or it's all of the crew over on the left. What is it that gives them this confidence? They say it's the youths. It's all the youths. And I've been meaning to grind this axe for a good long time, but I want you to hear the argument, and then we're going to talk about it very briefly here.
I'm going to keep this simple because, again, I speak fluent Kentuckian. Because for the same reasons I joined in 1983 to serve our nation. Remember, I didn't join to be a Navy SEAL. I joined to make a difference.
Again, that's the Galrine argument. The Massie argument, again, I joined to make a difference. I'm since I was a young man, these were the decisions I made. Massie's got a different perspective on this.
And it has all along, but why am I hopeful right now? Because if you looked at the crosstab in the polling, and I'm sure if we had exit polling, it would show the same thing. We have the younger demographic. We
Okay, so that's what he's chanting. This is what he's referring to. Here's the crosstabs here. So when you look at this, it's like, wow, check it out. 18 to 29-year-olds, 81.5% of them voted for Massie, and in the 65 and up, 61% voted for Galrine. So clearly, as the generation, pretty soon we just got to wait a couple of years here, and then hesto presto, it's the same thing that Ro Khanna said. It's the same thing, again, a lot of the Democrats have said. We just got to get the youths. Here is the issue, and this is something there are a lot of my competitors in the broadcasting space that don't get this, and I'm a little hesitant to share this with you because it is such good advice. The thing that they tell everyone, and I mean they tell everyone, when you're in broadcasting, when you're in streaming, podcasting, radio, whatever, the golden goose, the calf that is sought after, the tabernacle looked for in the desert. It's the youths. You got to get that 18 to 25 demo, because if you can get the youths to think you're cool, think of all the money you're going to make. They'll love you for life. That's not how it works. It's not how it works, and I'm tired of pretending that it is. You may notice that here on this show, I don't spend time telling the 18 to 25-year-old demo, those ones right below me. Again, I am 30 years old. I was born in June of 95. I am the very, very last of the millennials. I don't spend time simping after what Generation Z and Generation I Alpha behind them thinks about, because they're kids, they're children. And if you looked really closely, when it came to these particular numbers, what did you notice? You notice up there at the top, that 18 to 29, see that little percentage, that little in parentheses number? That's 5.4. 5.4% of the voters in this primary, 5% were 18 to 29. That number he's so proud of. That's not a good cross-section of an electorate. 5% of the generation, 38.6% of the voters were age 65. 45 to 64-year-olds, 39.4%. 30 to 44. Again, and what do you see? As people get older, they put away a lot of the stupid, because it turns out that after someone tells you, oh, I promise, I'm any day now, I'm going to have evidence that Erica killed her husband, Charlie. Now here, watch me mispronounce 800 words. Or the United States is going to get involved in a World War III nuclear ground game. Oh, because like, why wouldn't they? Because I mean, the Jews. I've only read the Bible once 2 years ago. You can only be told that so many times before you look around and go, wait a minute. You've never been correct once. And you also sound a lot like the Democrats who are literally never right about anything. People, as they get older, they get more conservative. Why? Because they see these things play out in front of them. Now, again, is that a guarantee? No. The reason that I broadcast my audience the way that it does, and the reason that I don't care that a lot of my audience is above the age of 30, is because, you know what? The real secret to the whole marketing game is that the older demographics keep replenishing. I don't have to go hunting for the newest trend of what all of the kids are doing. I don't have to do that crap, because those who are growing older and becoming more conservative and focused on their families and their communities and their countries, they're a sure thing. And by that I mean they've lived long enough to know that if I suddenly start saying things that don't come true, if I suddenly start making predictions that turn out to be crap, if I start endorsing bad ideas, they leave. And this amazing thing is happening. Our audience is growing because I'm following the very things that you gave to my generation. And guess what? Millennials had that kind of a voter gap back a couple of years ago. And Barack Obama was going to run forward and get all the millennials who were further to the left than any generation before them. And it just so turns out that millennials, as they grow older, they're getting more conservative. Oh, gee, wow. Generation X, as it gets older, getting more conservative. Oh, wowee. Good luck. Good luck. By the way, as far as the Generation Z polling on issues is concerned, it is quite literally the biggest rubber-banded pendulum of all time. Because all you have to do is go tell the kids, I'm going to give you the world. You want the moon, Mary? I'll get a lasso. Bring it down for you. I'll give you the moon. You can promise them that. And then if you don't immediately deliver the gimme money me, then all of a sudden, it's throw a temper tantrum, pout. I'm not going to vote for Bernie. I'm going to vote for Trump. I'm not going to vote for Trump. I'm going to vote for Gavin because he's mogging his chin. He's mogging. Morons, retards. When they grow up, a lot of them will figure out what's going on. That's why I'm not worried about it. And if you're an older man who's like, oh man, I have the youths on my side. Oh yes, the generation that's financing their burritos on Klarna. Oh, thank God. Super duper. Okay. Just incredible stuff. And again, this is why when Scott Jennings made his particular comment, you know, I laughed. You know, I think, again, a real Kentuckian making those points are correct. One other thing I want to mention on that vein before I'm done here. Rand Paul, even Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, he knows this. That's why when he was asked about the Massie primary, he did one of these.
Senator, just quickly, do you have any reaction to Massie's loss? No?
Oh, no right-away statement from the libertarian senator. Maybe it's because people are looking for those who are delivering, and Rand Paul knows if he saddles up with Massie, then he's screwed. He is. It's just the truth, guys. People want results. They want common deliverables, the stuff they sent you there for. Now, again, you can say, well, the economy is not popular right now. That's true, because the economy is not super duper alley-ooper right now. But why are there still Republicans who are sending the Trump endorsements to Congress and other offices around the country? Well, it just so happens that they believe that at the end of this mess comes something better. It's not instant gratification. It's not, oh, it's been 3 months. Quick, sound the alarm. Oh, no. No. Some of you were around for an actual gas crisis under Jimmy Carter. Some of you were around for a series of wars and conflicts that were not in 3 months and not doing what this is doing. Some of you were around for times like the Obama administration doing whatever it wanted regarding various wars that ended up into nothingness. So you're more patient. That does, in fact, matter. Now, down to the Georgia side, because I don't want to get rid of intern Andrew's excellent reporting here. I've told you that the state event for Indiana may be the Indy 500. The state event, the state holiday for Georgia is runoff elections. So in the Georgia Republican Senate, that primary to challenge Senator John Ossoff in November, Representative Mike Collins and then former football coach Derek Dooley have advanced to a June runoff election. Collins finished first with 41% of the vote and centered his campaign on strict border enforcement policies. Now, he gained national attention in 24 for introducing and helping pass the Laken Riley Act, which obviously strengthened federal detention requirements for certain non-citizens accused of crimes and was named after the Georgia nursing student who was slain, Laken Riley. Collins also argued that he could achieve bipartisan results without compromising on conservative values. Derek Dooley is also focused on some cultural issues and some economic matters as well. I'll have more to talk about on that in the upcoming couple of days, but Georgia is going to get really interesting between now and a month from now. Now, in the Republican gubernatorial primary runoff, you've got Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. He's Trump's endorsement, saying, quote, Georgia's not for sale, end quote. He's also very excited. A reporter asked him if this runoff was going to come down to the Trump endorsement. Jones said, I hope so, because I have it. So again, we're going to have to see. I'm not entirely sure. There's a couple of other Democrat runoffs in the House. We'll see. But at least as far as Georgia's concerned on this whole shtick at this point, it's going to be an interesting couple of months, because as for the bellwether of it's all over or it's amazing, neither party can claim it. Neither party. No one has any kind of a sure lock right now. And that's why you see a lot of the online people who trusted in their bots of an outrage from Pakistan. Yeah, it turns out that Pakistani bots can't vote in Kentucky's 4th congressional. So that said and aside, a couple of very, very, very quick mail time
on the Tony Kinnett Cast.
So again, to do the mail time stuff, the best way is to head over to our Discord. You can find the link to that in the description, whether it's the podcast side or the YouTube side. And then you can throw a question in the actual mail time channel, and that allows us to get a couple of answers out to you. So that stuff aside, very interesting question. It said one person from Indiana, Indy Cards, said they really appreciated the conversation with Congressman Stutzman from yesterday. Have I reached out to Congressman Jim Baird's office from Indianapolis to see if he'd come on to discuss why he also co-sponsored the Dignity Act? There's kind of a weird secret that's not really a secret. I really am not super duper involved with the Indiana Republican Party because it annoys and often bores me. That's just to be clear. Jim Baird and I don't really talk. He's on the other side of Indiana and he doesn't really talk to a lot of people. He's really old and grumpy, and he cares about talking with his constituents about as much as Kim Kardashian cared about studying for the bar. So it's not likely he's going to come on the show, just to be frank with you and answer that question, up front. I'll answer this question for fun. So what is it that I think actually happened to Thomas Massie? I've gotten this question a couple of times, then in the comments as well. I don't think it's as intense or as crazy as a lot of people are making it out to be. I think he bought into his own hype. There are people out there, some of them are my former colleagues, some of them are current, like colleagues in the conservative sphere, not at the Daily Signal. We don't tolerate this kind of stuff. But who buy into their own hype, who believe that people are tuning in to hear their opinion. And all it is an echo chamber of butt kissing. I do not believe, and God willing, and I mean a genuine prayer here, I hope that I never think you guys are tuning into this show because of me. I hope that you are tuning in because my team, which is a phenomenal team, producers Daniel, Jen, Lou, Josiah, and Allison, and also our excellent intern for the while, Andrew, that they are doing phenomenal work to bring you the updates that you're looking for in the day. We're actually writing our evening news show after 4 p.m. instead of at 11:30 like most of our competitors. And we don't just sit there a half an hour before the show starts looking at things on a browser like some shows that I've appeared on. That's why I hope you tune in. Not because Tony Kinnett, and I hope never, ever, ever. Because I've seen a lot of my colleagues and former colleagues that have fallen prey to this. And that's why now, instead of being on syndicated programming and delivering their views, they're on various YouTube channels, several of them, who are getting less than 2,000 views an episode and are flip-flopping their positions every 15 minutes. Or like those who are getting themselves out of elections because they think that everyone is so praiseworthy to them, they have to be right. Because after all, they're getting all this attention on Twitter and X. Wow. No. It's buying the own hype. There's an influencer age that came from people really believing they had everything in a bag of chips. And if there was one thing that running a stupid Twitter account of 400,000 something followers taught me, it's that none of that crap matters even a little. And actually, there was a viral story that I had back in like 2013 about a Jimmy John's sandwich of all things. It's another story for another time that did kind of teach me that internet fame means absolutely nothing. It's one of the reasons, again, I try so hard not to chase it. That's what I think happened to him, to answer your question. I know that's not like really exciting and lucrative. That's my answer. And I think he's dumb for doing so because he's old enough to know better. But alas, so were people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and, Tucker and all those other fools. But hey, what are you going to do? So the last question, I don't know if I really want to hit this as hard, from REN Force over on the Discord side, said, what do you make of Jesse Waters over at Fox News? Great dude. Strongly suggesting that the existence of reptilians and aliens and stuff. I'm going to disappoint you. You thought the glasses were coming off there. No, they're not. I'm going to disappoint you. So not only as an Indy Fundy Baptist, but also as a former science and biology teacher, I do not think that any kind of extraterrestrial life is even remotely a scientific possibility. The odds, the things that have to go right for life to exist in the first place, which we have never, ever, 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 despite all of our efforts, succeeded in making a brand new, freshly made life of any kind. I think that the idea that life actually spawns in places, it violates every single law of thermodynamics, the laws of replication in biology. It actually violates the rules that we set out for various patterns in anatomy and physiology. For example, by which I mean, once you have a set amount of genetic matter, it will never add on new genetic matter unless there's an outside force adding it on artificially. Everything tends toward entropy. You never actually see mutations in which there is some brand new skill totally and wholly derived. It's always piecemeal from earlier parts, which means things aren't turning into extra big things. And you may think I'm an idiot for that. It's totally fine. You don't have to agree with me. But no, I don't think there's any remote possibility at all for that. And I've looked at the fuzzy footages and things. No, I don't. And also, for extraterrestrial alien life to come all the way to Earth just to crash, no. I'm also kind of spoiled because having done some things, I got to be careful here, somewhat closely related to flying robots, Lockheed's been doing some fancy crap for a real long time. That's really all I have to say about that. So those things said, U.S. Congress acknowledged alien UFOs. No, they didn't. I'm sorry to disagree with you. No, there has not been like, there are aliens everywhere. Jasmine Crockett, these aliens are out here. We need reparations from the aliens, or, but these sentence, like, we have to tax them, tax the aliens because the capitalists, I know it in my bones, the reptilians. No, I mean, again, feel free to agree with me. Feel free to disagree with me. I have yet to see anything different according to the actual provable, observable, and reproducible science of it. That's my take. So, those things said, we'll see you tomorrow for Thursday. This has been our Wednesday, May the 20th episode of the Tony Kinnett Cast, nationally syndicated here on the Daily Signal and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.